Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show. And boy, does it feel good to say that again, because the podcast is back. I've heard from a lot of you over the last 4 months, hey, when's the pod coming back? When are we going to get new episodes? And we are back. We've got new content coming. We've got new episodes coming. You know, one of my goals for 2023 was I wanted to release 52 episodes this year. I wanted to release a new podcast episode every week of this year, but that didn't happen. We're actually currently on our longest ever dry spell in the pod, our longest break we've ever taken. It's been almost 5 months since we've released a podcast episode. And so you're probably saying, Tim, how can you make a New Year's resolution to release a new podcast every week of 2023, and then you take 5 months off during the first half of the year? And, you know, sometimes unexpected things happen. And so back in early February, my grandma passed, and we actually buried her 4 months to the day that I'm recording this. So we buried her in late February, and it kind of rocked me a little bit. My grandma is somebody who I love dearly. I still pray for her often. And when she passed, it caught me off guard. And if you guys ever get into a rhythm in your life, or you've got routine, and then all of a sudden you really get thrown off and you get thrown out of your rhythm, you know how hard it is to get back going. And so when my grandma passed back in February, right away, the podcast just felt kind of frivolous to me right away. It felt like it was unimportant. I was grieving. There were other things on my mind. There were other things on my heart. And I just didn't really feel like putting together a podcast episode that didn't have much meaning to me at that time, because I was dealing with some other stuff at the time. Then after a couple of weeks passed, I thought, you know what, it might be really cool to do a podcast episode about my grandma. So my grandma was not a fantastic athlete in her own right, even though she probably attended more high school games, especially St. Edmund games in Fort Dodge than anyone in the town of Fort Dodge's history. She probably went to 60 plus years of games, and almost every basketball game, football game, baseball game in those 60 plus years. So many people in Fort Dodge, and especially the St. Edmund community, knew my grandma and loved my grandma. But back when my grandma was in high school, she went to Hayfield High School, the Hayfield Hornets, back in, Hayfield, Iowa was like a north central Iowa small town. And grandma's claim to fame, her athletic claim to fame, was she actually made the state free throw tournament when she was in high school. And so there's these really great pictures of my grandma in these amazing like skirts and jumpers that they used to wear as basketball uniforms back in the 40s. And my grandma was a really good free throw shooter, and she made the state free throw championship. And I thought, you know what, maybe I should do a deep dive. This is kind of following the Moonlight Graham Show. Maybe I should do a deep dive into the Iowa girls free throw championships that took place from like the 1940s, post World War II. Actually, I think it might have been before that. It might have been like the 1920s. And so up until like the 1980s. And so I researched this. I got in touch with the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union, had some back and forth correspondence, and it turns out there's no record book. There's no scorebook. There's no record book of like who won, what the stats were. And so I wanted to do like a deep dive into my grandma's free throw stats, but there's literally nothing out there. There's records that they took place, but there's no records of like who won the state championship, how did the girls shoot when they were there. And so I have no idea how that went. All I know is that I've got some great pictures of my grandma with her free throw trophies. I'm pretty sure she did not win the state championship. Otherwise, you can be assured I would have heard that story a million times over. And so after the story of my grandma's free throw shooting kind of fell through, and I wasn't able to do the podcast episode that was on my heart at that time, I just thought, you know what? We're going to push the pause button on the Moonlight Graham Show right now until I feel inspired to bring it back. And so here we are, 4 months later, the end of June. 4th of July is kicking in. It is America's pastime. It is baseball season. And I'm here to bring back the Moonlight Graham Show. We've got some interviews recorded. We've got upcoming episodes next week, the following week, with stuff I'm really excited about. And I thought I'd take this time to not only welcome back, bring back the podcast, but also give some thoughts on baseball. So baseball is in full swing right now. And man, I feel like baseball has taken a lot of bullets over the last couple of decades here. A lot of it is deserved. But the state of baseball, at least from my perspective, is in a really, really good spot. So just going back to, if you remember back in February and March, the World Baseball Classic was coming up. And if you tune into the World Baseball Classic, and by the looks of the packed stadiums in February and March, by the looks of the TV ratings on the WBC, like a lot of people were watching this. And it was incredible to see, the personality, the energy, the excitement around baseball in Latin America and Asia. In Asia, Japan and Korea had great crowds. And then you had that championship game that most people remember, right? Because it was Mike Trout in the box, Shohei Ohtani on the bump, arguably the two best players in the world, their teammates for the Angels, and they were squaring off in the championship game of the World Baseball Classic. And then you have Shohei Ohtani representing his home country, blowing a 101-mile-an-hour fastball past Mike Trout to essentially end the game and the World Baseball Classic. And you couldn't have drawn up a different script. Granted, I wish America won, but you could not have drawn up a more compelling script for baseball fans at that point. And it was just a great way to get things going. Like, spring training is always great, but when you can get that type of competition that early in the season, it just felt like baseball was in a really good spot. Now moving towards the Major League season, because the Major League season, there's a lot of really great things happening with Major League Baseball right now. And I've had the chance over the past month to go to 2 Major League Baseball games. I was down in Atlanta for work a couple weeks back. I was there on a Tuesday night. So just random Tuesday night. Now the Braves are good, but just a random Tuesday night. It was Austin Riley bobblehead night. And I'm going to the game. Me and a colleague, we got tickets. We bought them at the last minute. We probably paid $40 a ticket for the nosebleeds. So right away we're thinking, man, you got to pay $40 a ticket just to get in the stadium in Atlanta right now in a random game in June. Then we go down to like the Ballpark Village area, and we're expecting, a couple of hours before the game. And right away we see there is a line literally 4 blocks long to get into the stadium 2 hours ahead of time and to get the Austin Riley bobblehead. And I was blown away. I knew the Braves had a good following, but the fact that people were lined up for, I'm not kidding, 4 blocks for an Austin Riley bobblehead 2 hours before the game was pretty incredible. I wanted the bobblehead. I got a collection of bobbleheads here. The rest of the night, I didn't get a bobblehead. I was literally bribing people. I think the most I offered was $40 for an Austin Riley bobblehead, and I could not get one Braves fan to give up the Austin Riley bobblehead. I mean, you got to think baseball's in a good spot if a random baseball fan will stand in line for 2 hours or 4 blocks to get a bobblehead and then not even sell it to somebody for $40. Just a kind of a worthless piece of plastic, right? Well, the following week after that, I was in Chicago, and I went to a Cubs game, and we were up on the rooftop, and it was a Wednesday night, not as packed of a stadium, but it was a pretty full stadium for Wrigley on a Wednesday night. Once again, like, just blown away by the weeknight crowds at Wrigley, and the Cubs stink. But Wrigley was packed. All of the rooftops were packed on just a random Wednesday night. Then the article comes out last week that MLB attendance, if you guys haven't seen this, you should look it up. MLB attendance has boomed across the board in the month of June. Over the last 2 weekends, the average attendance across Major League Baseball has been over 35,000 fans 2 weekends in a row. That's incredible. Because there are 16 games going on every night, and the average attendance is 35,000 people. My favorite story of the first half has been the Cincinnati Reds. Obviously, if you've been following baseball, you've seen Elly De La Cruz for the Reds, who is like, he's one of these freak athlete type guys, almost like a Giannis Antetokounmpo in the NBA, where you see the guy in a baseball uniform and you're like, whoa, that guy looks different. You see him run, you see him throw, you see him hit, and you think, whoa, this guy, I don't need to be a baseball expert to know that this guy is kind of a prodigy. And there's something special about the way this guy plays the game. And so Elly De La Cruz has taken Major League Baseball by storm over the past 40 days. And while that's happening, the Reds, who were supposed to be improved but not supposed to be great, they've kind of been a cellar dweller for a lot of the last 10 years, a lot of Joey Votto's run here. And all of a sudden, the Reds go on a 12-game winning streak, and they go from 5 games under 500, or 8 games under 500 to 3 games over 500 during that span. And the Reds in a 3-game series average over 40,000 fans a night in Cincinnati. And so overall, just the excitement around baseball right now, the ability for people, even when you think baseball has kind of lagging in popularity, to go to baseball games all across the country every night is still just incredible to me. People love going to baseball games. The other big story coming out of baseball has been, of course, early on, it was all these rule changes coming into play. And I'm not going to go through every rule change, but at first, especially when it comes to the pitch clock, I was unsure of how this pitch clock was going to go. I've on the real basic level, I'm not a huge proponent of the pitch clock. I don't like it. I've always liked that baseball does not have a clock, and there's no beginning point. There's a beginning point, but as a pitcher, I always like the fact that I can control the pace and the speed of the game by just holding the ball in my hand, and the game goes at the pace that I want it to go at. Now, at the same time, the game had dragged a little bit. If you went to a college game, if you went to a minor league game, you compare that pace to what was going on in the major leagues, where there's just so much dead time between every pitch. Now, all of a sudden, the game of baseball feels like it's being played at the pace that it should be played at. And so I'm all for 20-inning baseball games and 5-hour nights, but it shouldn't be because the time between the pitches is taking too long. And so I thought the pitch clock was going to make a 8 to 10 minute difference. The fact that it's more like a 20 to 25 minute difference on every game, I'm now a fan of it. Okay, I didn't expect this. I've changed my tune on the pitch clock because it has eliminated so much of that dead time, so much of that waste. I'm a fan of it. A couple of things I'm still not a fan of. The runner on second in extra innings, I think it's silly. I think it's stupid. One of my favorite things about baseball is those dog days of summer, 15-inning games. I've always loved that. The fact that we are eliminating that from the calendar is not my favorite thing. I think the runner on second, it's Little League in my opinion. The other thing that I'm not a fan of, and it just seems like baseball is moving towards robot umpires. And we've got to get the great Pat Hoberg back here on this podcast. We got to get his thoughts on this. But I do not like robot umpires. I think they're unnecessary. The umpires are very good. They're very, very good. And also, in my opinion, I think human error makes the game more interesting. Why is that? Throughout history, some of the best parts about baseball, I don't know if some of the best parts about baseball, but some great things about baseball are when you've got the managers yelling at the umpires, when you've got the hitters yelling at the umpires, when you've got other teams that want to fight each other. All of that stuff is good. It's conflict. It's disagreement. It's not perfect. That is entertaining. It is awesome when a manager runs out of the dugout acting like a child, screaming at the umpire. The crowd gets on its feet. Everybody loves it. The manager gets tossed, arguing balls and strikes. This is a great thing. We do not need robot umpires. We do not need video replay. Some of those errors just make the game more interesting, and it's fine. We want the brawls. We want the bean battles. We want the arguing with the umpires. Taking that out of the game, frankly, it makes the game more boring, and I'm not here for it. So the MLB, though, has had a great start to the season, even though my favorite team, the Twins, continues to drive me crazy on a night-in, night-out basis, and they are currently underperforming. Moving on to the College World Series. Last weekend, on Sunday, I had the chance to take my son Fitzpatrick to a College World Series game. I had not been to the College World Series in about 5 years, and this was the first time I had ever been there for an LSU game. And you always heard stories from the folks in Omaha that LSU, Texas, their crowds are different. When they are in it, they bring the thunder. They bring the heat. And I'd never really seen it until Sunday when I saw it in person. LSU versus Florida. The stadium was absolutely jam-packed. Absolutely jam-packed. And I would say 85 to 90% of the stadium was LSU fans. And guys, I am not exaggerating. Florida might have had 10 to 15% of the 25,000 people in that stadium. And the rest were wearing the purple and the gold of LSU. You count all of those people in the stadium. Every bar then around the stadium was packed full of LSU people. I just could not believe it. Like, it's not like this was Nebraska playing a home game. This is not like it was the University of Iowa right over here. This is folks from a poor state, LSU, that are spending a boatload of money to come up to Omaha for a week to watch their beloved Bayou Bengals. And I could not believe it. The other thing that really connected with me is not only does LSU bring a good crowd, and Florida had a good crowd there as well, but just nothing compared to LSU, but these fans were baseball fans. They really get it. They were obviously people that knew the team, watched a lot of baseball, watched a lot of college baseball, and so it was so much fun to sit in that stadium and watch a game, and both crowds are into it from a baseball standpoint. These folks weren't there just partying and getting drunk. They were true baseball fans, and the College World Series experience is incredible. I think my one nitpick on the College World Series in general is the stadium itself in Omaha is great. It's a newer stadium. It's probably, 15 years old at this point, but it doesn't have a lot of character to it. I'd like to see some type of party deck to it. I'd like to see the outfield resemble a little bit more like Rosenblatt bleacher bums like it used to. I'd like to see the foul territory reduced. I think there's too much foul territory down the lines, especially around home plate and up till third base, up till first base. Frankly, I'd like to see a little bit tighter feel that plays out a lot better on TV. When you're there in person, especially in front of a packed stadium, it's an incredible atmosphere, and just enjoyed the heck out of the College World Series. Not only that, but like the amount of talent, we might have had the top 3 MLB draft picks all playing in the championship of the College World Series. That's incredible. Once again, baseball is on a roll. My final point here talking about baseball. So we've talked about the World Baseball Classic. We've talked about the major leagues. We've talked about the College World Series. In Iowa, the topic that comes up every year is high school baseball in Iowa being played in the summer. And I'm actually a big proponent for Iowa high school baseball to be played in the summer. There's some obvious reasons, like the weather here in Iowa in the spring would reduce the schedule to not many games. We see that in Wisconsin. We see that in Minnesota. We see that in the Dakotas. They don't get many high school baseball games in. The other reason is there was a baseball tournament over in Fort Dodge. So if you haven't been following my Twitter account, you haven't seen that St. Edmund and Iowa Central Community College, they partnered on a brand new stadium at Harlan Rogers in Fort Dodge, and they have this great new turf stadium. They've got dugouts that are incredible. They've got clubhouses coming in. There's a huge green monster in left. It's probably the best high school field in the state of Iowa, and clearly the best junior college baseball field, in my opinion, in the state of Iowa too. It's just a really great setup. And they had a baseball tournament. Iowa Central hosted a baseball tournament a couple of weeks ago, and they had most of the best high school teams in the state of Iowa come there. So it was Johnston, it was Sioux City Heelan, it was Harlan, it was a lot of really, really good Iowa high school baseball teams. I think there was 8 of them that played on Saturday and Sunday. Where I'm going with this is that weekend you had about 30 college baseball coaches there scouting. Like the stands at this new stadium were just packed with college baseball coaches all weekend. And how's that work? How's that happen? It's because Iowa's playing high school baseball in the summer. If they were playing in the spring during college baseball season, none of those coaches would be able to come. They would have to they would have to see the kids on video. They would never get these chance to watch these Iowa high school baseball kids play in person. But because Iowa plays in the summer, it actually gives Iowa kids more exposure. Because they're the only state that plays in the summer, it gives them more exposure because they're the only they're the only high school state that is playing baseball. Now, if we played in the spring and then they just played Legion the rest of the year, they'd probably be number one, leaving high school to play in showcases in the spring. Number two, they'd probably still be playing Legion ball later in the summer anyway. So why not just play in the summer? It's great the way it is. I like that Iowa is unique there. I like that Iowa high school sports have 4 distinct seasons. And so it actually gives Iowa kids more exposure. Now, especially with the draft moving backwards, I think it actually plays in Iowa's favor even more. So I see this debate happening every year. It's always silly to me, and it always just reeks to me like everybody wants to complain about everything. And baseball, from the major leagues to the World Baseball Classic to high school baseball here in the state of Iowa, it's in a great spot, and let's enjoy it. So get out to a game, grab some peanuts, grab some Cracker Jacks, grab your son, grab your family, get out to a game this summer, enjoy the ballpark, because there's no better place to be on a warm June, a warm July night. And for my money, that's what I'm going to be doing the rest of the summer, along with putting out new episodes of the Moonlight Graham Show. So it's good to be back. Thank you for continuing to listen to the pod. Thank you for subscribing, leaving us 5-star reviews. Thanks for asking, to bring the pod back. It made me feel good. So now that we're back, we're going to get on a roll here. So have a great week. Have a great 4th of July, Moonlighters.
It's Moonlight